On an autumn morning in 1923, a woman in Berlin walks to the market to buy bread with a basket full of banknotes. She's not using the basket to carry the bread home, she's using it to carry the money, because it no longer fits in a wallet. When she steps inside the shop, she leaves the basket outside for just a moment, not out of forgetfulness, but because she'd set it down in a corner and simply hadn't thought to cover it. When she returns, she's stunned. The basket has been stolen. But the money, the banknotes, are still lying right there on the ground. The thief left the money behind and took only the basket. Read that again. A thief, given the opportunity, chose not to take the money, he took the basket instead. Because at that moment in Germany, paper money was worth less than the newsprint it was printed on. Today I'm going to tell you a story you'll find hard to believe is real. The days when a country's currency, quite literally, died. A world where workers carried their wages home in wheelbarrows, where people burned banknotes for heat instead of firewood, where the price of a cup of coffee doubled while you were still drinking it. And behind this collapse, we'll see how one of the most famous laws in economic history, Gresham's law, actually played out. Stay until the end, because this story is far more relevant to today than you'd think. The story begins in 1919. World War I has ended, Germany has been defeated, and the Treaty of Versailles has been signed. Its terms are brutal. Germany is required to pay 132 billion gold marks in war reparations. The number is so staggering that some economists of the time say outright that it's simply impossible to pay. But Germany has another problem. Throughout the war, the government had already been printing money to finance it, relying on the printing press instead of taxation. That habit didn't end when the war did. It grew worse. Because to pay reparations, to pay workers' wages, to keep the state running, the government had one easy solution: print more money. In 1921, $1 was worth about 90 marks. It sounds bad, but it isn't a disaster yet. Within a year, though, the number starts compounding. By the end of 1922, $1 is worth 7,400 marks. And the real nightmare begins in 1923. In January 1923, when reparation payments fall behind, France and Belgium invade the Ruhr region, the industrial heart of Germany. The German government responds with passive resistance. It tells workers to stop working, but to keep drawing their wages anyway. And where does that money come from? You guessed it, the printing press. This is exactly where things spiral completely out of control. Now I'm going to give you a few numbers, and I want you to actually try to picture them, because hearing a statistic and grasping what it really meant to live through are two very different things. In January 1923, $1 was worth 17,000 marks. By July, that number had risen to 353,000. By August, it had reached 4.6 million. In November 1923, listen closely, $1 was worth 4.2 trillion marks. Prices were doubling every 3 to 7 days. That means the newspaper you bought in the morning had a different price by the time you got home that evening. In a Berlin restaurant, waiters would constantly update the prices on the menu in chalk while customers were still eating, because prices genuinely changed between the moment you ordered and the moment you paid the bill. Some memoirs recount that you might pay 5,000 marks for a coffee when you started drinking it, and by the time you finished, the price had risen to 8,000. So the smartest strategy was to place your order and pay immediately, up front. Workers had to keep pace with this madness. Factories began paying wages not once a day, but twice, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Why? Because a worker who waited from morning until afternoon would find that the wages he'd received that morning had already lost a large share of their purchasing power. Workers would run home on their lunch break to hand the money straight to their wives, who would then rush to the market to buy whatever they could: bread, soap, coal. It didn't matter what, because an hour later that same money would buy less. Banknotes became so worthless that the arithmetic itself turned absurd. The Reichsbank stopped printing small denominations like 1, 2, or 5 marks because they were meaningless. Instead, it printed notes worth 1 million, 1 billion, even 100 trillion marks. Picture a country where a banknote reads 100 trillion mark. And perhaps the most striking detail of all, printing a banknote came to cost more than the paper itself was worth. People genuinely began using money as fuel. Burning bundles of banknotes in the stove was cheaper than buying firewood for winter. Children played in the streets, building towers out of stacks of worthless banknotes. Housewives papered their walls with banknotes because it was cheaper than wallpaper. Now let's get to the cleverest part of this story. How did people actually behave in the middle of this madness? This is where we need to go back to the 16th century, to the English financier Sir Thomas Gresham. The law that bears his name can be summed up in one simple sentence. Bad money drives out good. What does that mean? If you hold two kinds of money, one with real intrinsic value, like gold or silver, and one with only nominal, assigned value, like paper currency, and the state forces you to treat them as equivalent, people behave rationally. They hoard the valuable one, save it, refuse to part with it, and they spend the worthless one as fast as they possibly can. In Weimar Germany, this law played out with textbook clarity. Gold and silver coins were technically still in circulation, but no one would spend them. People hoarded every gold or silver coin they got their hands on, tucking it under a mattress or burying it in the ground. Why? Because the real value of the metal inside that coin was far greater than its printed face value. The metal value of a silver mark was many times higher than the purchasing power of a paper mark. As a result, the only money actually circulating in the market was the rapidly collapsing paper mark. The good money, gold, silver, solid foreign dollars, and British pounds, got pulled into vaults, stockings, and boxes buried in the ground. The bad money, meanwhile, passed from hand to hand as fast as possible, like a hot coal nobody wanted to hold. No one wanted to keep a paper mark in their pocket for more than a minute. This situation gave rise to a strange second economy. Germans increasingly began transacting in foreign currency. Hard currencies, like the American dollar and the Swiss franc, effectively created a parallel economy. Anyone holding dollars was considered wealthy. Tourists, foreign journalists, employees of foreign companies paid in dollars suddenly lived like royalty in Berlin. An American student could exchange just a few dollars and live for weeks in Berlin's finest hotels, because the exchange rate had turned so wildly against the German mark. And this wasn't limited to gold versus paper money. It happened even between different kinds of paper currency. As trust in the central government's mark evaporated, some local cities and companies began printing their own, not Geld, emergency money. In certain regions, people trusted the paper issued by a local company they knew more than they trusted the government's own mark. Gresham's law showed up fractally, repeating itself at every layer of the economy. Everywhere, the good was hoarded and the bad was rushed out the door. That's exactly why the thief at the start of this story was being so rational. The paper money in that basket wasn't even worth stealing. The basket itself, something tangible, durable, with genuine use value, was a more reliable store of wealth than the cash. How did this macroeconomic madness change the lives of ordinary people? Retirees and savers were hit the hardest. A pension fund built up over an entire lifetime couldn't buy a single loaf of bread within a year. The entire value of a life insurance policy shrank to the price of a streetcar ticket. A German family's wealth, accumulated across generations, simply evaporated, not stolen, not lost, still there numerically, but meaning nothing anymore. This is why barter, a trade-based economy, made a comeback. Farmers preferred to sell their produce directly for goods rather than money, because any cash they received would rapidly melt away after the sale. City families traveled out to the countryside to trade jewelry, watches, and family heirlooms for a sack of potatoes or a few kilos of flour. In some places, packs of cigarettes effectively became a currency, durable, universally wanted, a standard medium of exchange. But perhaps the darkest consequence of this collapse wasn't economic at all, it was social. The middle-class, doctors, teachers, civil servants, retirees living off their savings, was impoverished overnight. These were the people who formed society's stable backbone, and all of them collapsed at once, for the same reason, having done nothing wrong. Historians still debate today how much this trauma contributed to how quickly extremist political movements found a foothold in Germany a decade later. A society that lost faith in its money also lost faith in its institutions. So how did this madness finally stop? In November 1923, with the economy standing right at the edge of the abyss, Germany took a radical step under the leadership of its new finance commissioner and Reichsbank president, Hjalmar Schacht. The solution was ingenious. They created an entirely new currency, the Rentenmark. But instead of backing it with gold, Germany's gold reserves had already been drained by reparations. They backed it with a theoretical mortgage on Germany's agricultural land and industrial assets. It sounds almost imaginary, and economists today largely agree it was, in essence, a confidence trick, but it worked. The truly critical step was that the government finally, firmly stopped relying on the printing press. The new money supply was tightly restricted, and something remarkable happened. Within just a few weeks, prices stabilized. The old banknotes, worth trillions, were exchanged at a rate of 1 trillion old marks to one new written mark. Overnight, most of the zeros disappeared. This went down in history as a small rehearsal for the later German economic miracle, proof of just how quickly confidence can be restored with the right policy signals. But of course, the wealth that had been lost never came back. The elderly who lost their pensions, the families who lost their savings, never got that money back. So what do we actually learn from this story today? Gresham's law isn't just some exotic historical footnote specific to 1920s Germany. The same logic plays out anywhere, in any era, where people hoard valuable assets, gold, foreign currency, even cryptocurrency, while rushing to spend whatever is losing value. You can see the same behavioral patterns in Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, in Argentina, in any country experiencing high inflation today. People spend their wages the moment they receive them. They stockpile dollars or gold, and they simply don't trust paper money. Weimar Germany shows us something important. Money isn't just a number printed on paper. Money is a system of trust. It works as long as a society believes its government and central bank will keep giving that paper value. And once that trust breaks, a society can slide, remarkably fast, into a world where it's not the money in the basket that has value, it's the basket itself. So what do you think? How fragile is your own trust in the money in your pocket right now? Let's discuss it in the comments. And if you want to see more of these hidden economic stories from history, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.